Hello and welcome back underwater, everybody, and welcome back to Key West Waterman. My name is Aaron Young. To catch up to speed, if by chance you missed last week's episode, unfortunately we had to say goodbye to our sweet puppy Tipsy. She was almost 14 years old. I got her when she was 6 weeks old, so it was a very rough week and still continuing into another rough week. But we cut an episode short and just really wasn't in the mood to film and haven't been in the mood much to film lately. And we had a trip to the Bahamas planned already, which we continued on. And I really wasn't in the headspace to do any more like talking or filming or cooking or anything there. But it was such a beautiful place. I did want to film some underwater stuff. So that's what this video is going to be today. It's going to be all underwater, some spearfishing, mainly lobster. I think there was one or two fish in here, but I did want to share it with you guys. It was a beautiful trip. It was nice timing, I guess, kind of got my mind away from things a bit, but yeah, that's where we're at. We just got back from the Bahamas, so here's some footage. We're going to talk about it. Hopefully you enjoy it a little bit. While we were there, we did fly there. We did not have access to a boat. We did all shore dives, which wasn't a problem. There's so much structure there around the islands, especially in the more remote areas. Where we were was extremely remote, so there was a lot to do, a lot to look at. We did follow for the internet warriors out there. We did follow all of the local regulations. Where we were, you had to be 200 yards offshore. We used Google Earth and a lot of other tools to make sure that we were following the regulations. We were far enough out. But if you're not familiar with Bahamas, it is pole spear or Hawaiian sling only, which I do enjoy. I'm not very good at pole spearing, but I was excited to get out there and put my hands on one. This is the new pole spear from Koa. Koa Spearfishing. John came out with a line of pole spears. Really love them. Had a great time with them. I'm looking forward to putting them to work more. Putting them to work more, especially down here in the Keys. I enjoy the pole spear thing. It's very primitive and it's more of a challenge. But you can see I'm going through caves, just searching around. The bottom structure here was just insane. I mean, we're less than a quarter mile offshore. And there's just these huge caves and caverns everywhere, giant rock piles, just some really, really incredible structure. And we'll hop into some lobster stuff. If you're not familiar, in the Bahamas, you can spear lobster. It is legal. It is a strange feeling for me, but I got used to it. This particular dive, you can see I'm taking a section out of the Koa pole spear to shorten it up. The area I was going in was very tight. So I wanted to shorten it up, have a little more maneuverability once I got inside the cave. That's what's cool about these pole spears is they are sectional, so you can change the sizes. I think it's like 6 or 7 feet, and you can change it up to 8 or 9 feet. I was using the roller pole spear model. He has roller and traditional models. But yeah, shortened it up just so I could get into this cave a little better, and you'll see it was really fun. These lobster were just doing a little test fire there. These lobster were, I'll just use the word different. They were bigger. For the most part, we'd always find them solo. They'd be by themselves. I think we found a couple of pairs, but for the most part, they were always by themselves, deep in a cave, solo. Some of them, the second you'd flash them, they'd take off. They would run or kick back. But it was just very different. I think as the structure, they're bigger, maybe they're smarter. You can see coming around this little corner, upside down, trying to get lined up. Take a shot and hit them right where I wanted. But yeah, they were just different. I really enjoyed it. I tried to catch a couple by hand, but I was losing them, so I didn't go any further than that. But I don't know that I would have been able to catch any by hand. They just had too many back doors. The bottoms and caves was too elaborate. This was probably the average size one we saw. This is a Keys giant, but where we were, this was pretty much the average. This is probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 pound lobster maybe. Really, really cool to see. And if you know me, you know I love dispatching everything. I don't want anything to suffer. There actually is a way to dispatch lobster. You can see on the ridge there, I guess you call it the chest or the belly, where the top 2 legs meet. Just be careful not to run the knife all the way through the back and into your hand. run the knife right in there, turn or twist, whatever you want to call it, and that it'll kill that lobster instantly. And something else I actually do that I didn't show in the video is I'll take the knife and poke just between the carapace or the head and the tail where they meet, and it'll help that lobster bleed out a little better. So this was another really cool cave. We got out closer to the reef where the waves were breaking, and it gets real shallow, obviously, because the reef comes up. There's a barrier reef. So some of these spots were only 8 feet deep, 10 feet. This was my first time swimming in this one. I did poke my head in there and saw that it went a ways back, so I got a good breath and my flashlight ready. You can see some black margate there on my left. And I just wanted to come in and check it out, see what was going on. And I learned very quickly hunting these caves is very difficult because to go in there with a long pole spear ready to shoot, a lot of them are so tight you can't really swing it around, so it was very difficult. So a lot of times I would go in and investigate first and see something that I needed my pole spear for. But mainly looking for lobster, not as big of a deal. You can see I look to the right there and there's a really nice lobster tucked up under that ledge. Again, way deep in a cave all by itself. So I should have broken the pole spear down again. Such a tight cave. Should have taken the midsection out. I was being lazy. You'll see what lazy gets me here in a couple minutes. So I went in there with a full-length pole spear again. I think it's, I have to look it up. I should know this information. I think it's 9 feet fully put together. I think if you take a section out, it's 7. Or maybe 8 feet and 6, I can't remember. But anyways, I went in there with full-length pole spear. I should not have, being lazy. So I'm trying to get a hold of the band there to get loaded, and I smack the slip tip on a rock and pull back, and the tab of the slip tip catches the rock and comes off. So I'm in here in the dark, in a cave, fumbling. I can't really see very well. And I realize probably better to get out, catch my breath, and try and start this over. This would have been a lot easier. My buddy Miles keeping an eye on me. A lot easier if I would have went in there with a smaller pole spear setup.
I'm not too heavy. I smacked my slip tip on a rock and it came off, and it's like, I'm just gonna take my time.
And I didn't do it intentionally this time, but this is something I actually will do with a gun or a pole spear. If I know where a fish is and it's, say it's rocked up and it's not moving, I will go and set my gun or pole spear there first. That way I'm not swimming in with it, and I can get a good breath, get in there, get a hold of it, and get to work. But I didn't do it intentionally that time. I did it out of necessity. Got a little sand in the tip there, so it wasn't sitting right. So I get loaded, get lined up on the lobster, and what I didn't realize is that the tail or the butt of the pole spear was hitting the ground. So when I line this up and let go, it hits the ground and goes to the left because it skips off the bottom. So I just flat out missed a giant lobster point blank because, again, my laziness, not taking that section out. It was just the pole spear was too big to have in there. I shouldn't have done that. So I come to my senses. Miles had his pole spear set up smaller, so I asked if he didn't mind if I borrowed it. Instead of going in there, pulling mine out, taking a section out, I just went in there with his. I think he had it set up as a 6-foot pole spear, so a lot more maneuverable in these tight quarters. And now, because I already shot at the lobster, it's at a really weird angle and I can barely get to it, so I had to wiggle myself in there. And I had just enough space between myself and the lobster and enough of an angle that I could get a shot on it. You got to leave a little space on these pole spears because they have to gain speed to be able to penetrate. I've seen people try to put the spear directly on the lobster when they shoot it, and it won't penetrate because that pole spear hasn't created enough momentum to power through it.
Alright, it's in him.
So now it is retrieval time. In between these dives, I'm taking 2 minutes or so just trying to catch my breath, calm down, because these are, you see a really big triggerfish there took off. these are not easy dives. It's not that I'm going deep or far, but it's, you know, it's a little unnerving going in a cave that tight, especially if you're claustrophobic. I'm not really claustrophobic, but still, it's a little unnerving. And luckily, the lobster had walked out because they realized, you know, something was going on, and it made the extraction quite a bit easier. I'm just trying to be careful, make sure I'm not getting wrapped by anything, not in a hurry, really take my time. And you'll see when this thing comes out. This is, I think, the second biggest lobster I got the entire trip. This was, we didn't have a scale, and I'm basing off of what I've seen in the past. This thing was probably 7 pounds. Just unbelievable. Again, right there between those front legs. Do not run the knife through to your hand. Twist and dispatch. Just before this, I dove in this ledge and saw some nice lobster. Didn't have my camera on, so I'm coming back in ready to go, and this snuck up on me. I looked to my left, and there was a really nice Nassau grouper. I tried to turn on it, and by the time I got my pole spear that way, it had already taken off and dipped down into this little cut. And they actually closed now. While we were on this trip, they were open, and I did want to get one because they are prohibited to harvest here in the Keys. So I thought it'd be cool to shoot one, but that one snuck up on me. But you see another real nice lobster. I go line up on this thing, and my camera goes right behind a rock. You can hear I hit it, took a shot, hit it just right. That actually happened another time. These caves were so tight it was hard to look at the lobster and make sure my camera was in frame. It's on my head, so I can't really tell. But unfortunately, I missed that shot there. But we saw a ton of these Nassau grouper. This was the first day we had seen one. I think this was the second day, and ton of them, probably 3 to 5 pounds or so, but we were trying to be a little more selective and take some nicer ones because we had a few people to feed. But that was the first big one we had saw, and it really got the wheels turning because up until this point we had mainly just been seeing lobster and a lot of just reef fish. So this was probably a stupid mistake, but I go back in there. I assumed the grouper was going to go far back and rock up, so to speak, or like be in a crack or like wedge itself somewhere. I was fully not expecting it to come back out. So I went down without my pole spear and just my flashlight, and here it is again, just sitting there. And I was not ready. I fully assumed that it had already gone and hid. So I was just trying to see where it went. And silly me. It'd have been a tough shot anyways. That cave was so tight it was really hard to swing that pole spear around, but it was neat seeing a Nassau that size. There was one more lobster, but it was so far back there. I'm just telling myself this lobster's not worth your life. I didn't need to go any further back than I had already. It would have been a really tricky shot to get that pole spear in there anyways. So after seeing that fish twice in a row, I figured the odds are not good I'm going to see it again, but I'm going to try. So I looked a few more times. But this time I wanted to go in with the intention of leaning to the left, have the pole spear at the right angle, and see if it would be sitting in that right spot, or that same spot. And as you can imagine, because I went in ready, it was not there. And it was weird. The Nassau here act like red grouper, and they almost did here, but in more of like a sneaky way. They weren't like skittish and running. They just would always pop up in the wrong spot, look at you for just a sec, and then just slowly swim off. They weren't bolting or taking off like black grouper do. But they eluded us for I think the first probably 3 or 4 days at least. But it was interesting seeing them. We see them in Key West, but their behavior is a little different. And this was some type of eel on the way out. I think this was the third morning. I'd never seen that one. If you know the name of that eel, I'd be curious to know. It was just out in the open, wasn't in a rock or near anything, just hanging out. Really cool yellow spots. So I had my sights on another lobster here, way back in the cave, but it was a straight shot, so I kept the pole spear full length. This is another one of those where the camera I catch myself looking under. You can see the lobster just briefly there, but the camera was above a rock. Line up and actually hit this one perfect. Bullseye right between the antenna. Guess you could say I stoned him. Here's a clip of my wife Madeleine doing her part to feed the troops. She got out there and speared a few. It was really cool to have her with me seeing this stuff. These, like I said, the bottom is just, it's nothing like we get in Key West. Just really was, even just snorkeling around was incredible.
Nice one. Sweet. There's two more.
Yeah, some. Where? Oh, right there.
That shark.
Oh.
At the end of that clip there, you did see a shark come in, and we saw sharks every day. Never had any real issues with them. They were definitely curious, definitely following us. We never really had any charges or anything like that, so luckily no problems, but there were a lot of reef sharks around. And this is just a clip exploring a little bit. I've said it 14 times already in this video. These caves were just unbelievable. They were beautiful. There was all kinds of little shrimp, and you see a Spanish lobster there. I actually tried to catch a couple of these. They were normally so far back I couldn't get the pole spear to them. But all the Spanish lobster I saw were really big. They were like a little smaller than an average Keys lobster, but you could almost never get to them. And on my way up, I realized Miles shot an absolute monster lobster.
Jumbo. Where was he at?
Over on top over here.
Really?
It seems like if there's a little ledge on top of it.
Dude, that's as big. That's as big as the one I shot earlier. That's like a 6-pound lobster.
Miles didn't have a knife, so I was going to dispatch it for him, but it's hard to tell how big they were. We actually took this one and put it next to the one that I shot earlier in the day, and this one was a lot bigger. And this one was probably another pound and a half bigger than the one I shot. I wish we would have had a scale with us. The biggest lobster I've ever seen in person was 8.5 pounds, and these were definitely flirting with it. This was probably the easiest lobster I saw the whole trip. He was pretty out and accessible. And just to keep YouTube land real, this was not all in one day. This was over the span of a week. We were there Saturday to Saturday. There was a nice one back in here. We had, at this point on this particular day, we had a decent amount of lobster, so I'd let that one be. That would have been a difficult shot anyways. I don't know if I would have been able to get the pole spear in there. So we started using landmarks and were able to get back to some of the spots we had previously hit, those areas where we were starting to see the bigger Nassau grouper. And this was, I think, the fourth day. And this is that cave where I shot that big lobster and saw the black margate. We got pretty good at getting back to the same spots from shore. But we went back there. It was a little rougher this day. You can see it's kind of turbulent under there. There's sand flying around. It was really hard diving because inside the cave it was throwing you up and down. But we wanted to get back to this area to see if we could relocate one of those nicer Nassau groupers, because up to this point, sounds bad, we had just been eating lobster and we wanted to eat some fish. We were just trying to get eyes on one of the grouper at this point. My buddy Mason said he saw him take off in this direction, but it had been probably 20 minutes since we had seen one. So I'm not swimming in loaded, ready to go. Just trying to locate it, get a general idea of where these things are hanging out. This particular cave was really tight. It was hard to even get in. And I come in, look to my right, and I see, of course, big Nassau grouper sitting there. So I immediately bring my light down just for a split second to see if he'll stay, see how he reacted, because I don't ever hunt these. I see him in Key West, but I'm not allowed to hunt them, so I don't pursue them. I don't know their behavior as well. So I took the light off of it to see if it would stay there. So I used that trick, put my pole spear in first, get a good breath, come back in. And I didn't want to turn my light on until I was ready to go. So I'm trying to get loaded. Flick that light on, see if he's sitting there, and of course, it was gone. So this is pretty funny. I came back to the other side because we spotted the grouper. We knew where it was, what cave it was in. So I come in this side, loaded, ready to go. looking around, just scanning everything, trying to sit still a little, just crawl across the bottom. That way if I do see it, I'm not spooking it. You can see all the water moving. That's how bad the waves were this day. It was really windy. Went as far as I was comfortable with, probably a little farther than I was comfortable with. I would love to know what those little fish are. I don't know what those are. They almost look like piranhas or something. Waiting for it, so I unload my spear, decide it's time to go. On my way out, I look to my right, and who is sitting there? The Nassau grouper. I was getting frustrated, to say the least. And this is what a frustrated shot looks like. I didn't even have a shot here. I just threw a Hail Mary. I was getting angry. Wasn't broadside, wasn't close enough. That was just strictly a frustration shot. There's some really big triggerfish we kept seeing, and anything we saw for the most part was, again, I don't want to say skittish, because they would stay around. You could see them. They would just stay out of range of the pole spear. And the triggerfish would swim around you. The second you drop down and load, they'd go 30 feet away and just kind of look at you. And we were close to shore. We were in a really remote area, but we were close to shore, so maybe they see people. I'm not sure. But it was fun. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the challenge. You can see here there was, I don't want to say a big mutton, the biggest mutton I probably saw during the trip. It was maybe 20 inches, 18 inches. Grunting, throwing some sand, and it just didn't want anything to do with me. So this was the next morning. You can see the sun's out, wind calmed down a little bit. Mason and I chased a nice little yellowfin grouper in here. The limit there is 3 pounds, which would be hard for a beginner if you're not familiar, but I've seen enough fish that I can guesstimate pretty good. I go well over. This fish was probably 4.5 pounds at least. But again, we hadn't put a lot of fish on the deck, so to speak, so we were anxious to eat a few fish. And this yellowfin rocked up in this hole, and using the light trying to line up. I don't think you can see it very well, but I knew it was definitely big enough. Miles was there on the other side. It was just very squirmy. And I looked in there, and he sat broadside just long enough, and I didn't hesitate. I didn't mean to snake Miles' fish, but we were just trying to put one on the end of a spear. And that one ended up working out. So I'm dealing with my fish, I guess all the commotion, and I thought I turned my camera off, but it was on. One of the bigger Nassau came in to check out all the commotion, and Miles, he had a pole spear a little too short. He had a 6-foot pole spear. I think if he had a bigger one, he'd have had enough range to get this, but that big Nassau came in, and I went to click my camera on, and I turned it off, and I missed the shot, but he got on it pretty quick and was able to put a shot in it. You can see that shark came in to check us out. A little team effort here. I didn't want it to get any farther back in the hole. I think this was our 4th or 5th day, and we finally put some fish on the deck. Beautiful Nassau. This was maybe only an hour later. Miles hollered at me. I was just on the other side of the rock. He got another nice Nassau. I put a shot in, but it was wedged up under this rock really tight, and figured I'd give him a hand trying to get this thing out. Grouper extraction is my specialty.
He's bleeding pretty good. Looks like you hit him pretty good. I can't really get other than just driving it right through the meat. Let me get my hand in there and see if I can feel it, how toggled it is.
So we were debating on putting a second shot in it, but we'd have to put a second shot in it from a different angle. And with slip tips on pole spears, you can't really thread a 6-foot pole spear through a tight hole without snapping it or bending it. So my job here was, or my plan here was to get my hand in there, make sure the fish was secured, that the slip tip toggled. You can't really see much. I'm just wedging myself into sand under the rock and working on feel. So I'm making some little adjustments. I can get my hand on the fish. I can feel the cable shooting line, and I can feel the slip tip. The grouper had just flared its gills in the rock, so I really couldn't budge it. It's like having a kickstand on. You just can't pull it back the other way. And I worked him out a little. You can see the sand is flying everywhere, and he was just making it really difficult. Obviously, this fish is fighting for its life. I try not to, keep them in there any longer than they need to be, but sometimes this is just a part of it. And he was definitely bleeding out. I could see some blood in the water, but he, had a little fight left in him. So I'm just trying to wiggle him back and forth, trying to get those. I couldn't reach the gills to fold him down, so I'm just trying to wiggle it back and forth to get the gills to fold. So after wiggling him a bit, you can see I made some ground there. I pulled him out far enough that the gills were past the rock, and I go to readjust my hand, and he swam right back in the hole, and I lost all the ground I had covered. I probably cut, 4 or 5 dives out of this. This took a while. It took longer than I had hoped for. I honestly think the fish bled out enough and he got just too tired. He couldn't fight. Just wiggling it back and forth. I was able to get the tail. I could get the line. His gills were locked in those rocks. And you just got to pivot them back and forth, and was able to get him all the way out there. Another really nice Nassau. And this is funny. Here's another case of the lazies. I had the float line with the dive float attached to it. I had it to the back of the pole spear. And I know good and well it's going to slow the pole spear down, and I didn't take it off, and you can see I shot at that fish, and it didn't go anywhere because it was pulling the weight of all the float line and the dive float, and it came up well short. So I spotted some really nice legs sticking out of this hole, and I didn't realize how big this lobster was until after. So I didn't think much about it. I didn't really get nervous because I didn't realize how big it was. You can see just enough of his legs and a little bit of his head. And I line up broadside on the carapace, take a real nice shot, real easy, had a straight line, and start pulling on it. And once this thing comes out, I really wish I would have had a scale. I hate throwing numbers out there, but it had to be flirting with, I don't know, 9-10 pounds maybe. And the camera doesn't really do justice either because these cameras are wide angle zoomed out, but it was the biggest lobster I've ever seen in person. And what's really great about lobster this size is there's so much meat in the head and the legs and the knuckles. I actually crunched up all the heads, made some stock, boiled the legs and the knuckles, and busted that meat out. I was literally just sitting on the beach eating lobster legs. It was a fantastic time.
That one may take the crown. That might be it.
Definitely my biggest lobster. I don't know that I will ever top that. Really was a treat to harvest a creature like that. Just incredible trip. Thanks everyone who was involved. Really one that we will not forget. We actually did some sightseeing, so I'll throw up some clips from that. We visited a place called Queen's Bath and Glass Window Bridge. I can't remember if I said it. We were actually in Eleuthera. But one of the second to last days, my buddy Mason actually shot a toad Nassau grouper. I've seen my fair share of grouper. Didn't have a scale, but this thing was flirting with 20 pounds, if not more. Doesn't look like it in the video, but it was a giant.